I am yet to speak to an executive who has left their full-time corporate role and started a second career who has regretted it. Once people do it, they always say, I wish I'd done it sooner. I remember very vividly standing in my office thinking, all I have done here is create myself a golden cage. At that point, I really stepped back to reevaluate, what am I doing? What is life about? What's important? And that was the shifting point for me.
Welcome to this week's episode of Wealth Talk. My name's Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for WealthBuilders, joined today by our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Chris. Good to be with you again and good to hear from another WealthBuilder member.
Today's guest is Adrian Knight, and Adrian's going to be sharing with us what a non-executive director actually does and why it's such an attractive path for experienced executives. And he's got lots of experience himself. And always good to have our members sharing how they are building their own wealth.
A real knight and shining on.
And a quick reminder just before we dive in that we've still got our budget guide available. And if you'd like to download a copy of that, head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/budget 2025. All right, onwards. So, this idea of portfolio careers will come into the conversation today, Kevin, and it kind of aligns with what we always talk about. It's multiple streams of income, so never being reliant on one source. And of course, for executives, many of them will have spent many decades just focused on work, and one income stream from the salary.
Well, quite right. And of course, we know that that's risky, especially in uncertain times. You know, there's obviously we saw number of executives suffer in COVID. We've seen the threat of will artificial intelligence create and put people into redundancy. There's all sorts of different threats that will come at any time to any career, and any one of anything is very risky. One big customer, one big supplier, one big source of business, and one big source of income. And invariably, senior executives, that's pretty much who Adrian serves, generally very highly paid. And while they do have a high income, they're paying super high taxes and often paying the price of a loss of that family time, bearing in mind the pound of flesh they often have to give to keep that career going. So one hopes that there's a point at which that balance can shift. And I think Adrian does a great job of helping people to identify that, step into almost a new career, a portfolio career, which, as you say, dovetails very nicely into a portfolio of wealth creation, hence the 7 pillars. That's really a portfolio, isn't it? Multiple streams of recurring income in diverse ways. So whatever happened in the budget, whatever happens in life, you're never really truly devastated by anything. You can be inconvenienced and you could be disappointed, but that's about it.
So Adrian's going to share with us how to turn decades of corporate experience into multiple income streams and why time freedom is often the missing ingredient for wealth creation. So no further ado, let's head on to our conversation today with Adrian Knight. Adrian, welcome to Wealth Talk today. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Christian. How are you?
I'm fantastic, thank you. And it's really lovely always to have our members on the podcast to share, what they're doing, how they're helping others, and how obviously you're growing your own business and your own wealth. So we're excited to hear your journey and your story today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me on the show. It's it's a great show and I'm really a big fan. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, let's get straight into it then, Adrian. Tell us, what is it that you do now? What is your business?
So I help senior executives step into like a second stage of their career. So typically I help senior executives to build out a non-executive directorship portfolio, so to take on non-exec appointments, to secure fractional consulting and advisory work, typically with smaller businesses, sort of small to medium-sized businesses.
Okay, fantastic. So there's a few terms there that I think we should unpack. So non-executive directors, sometimes you see that as an NED. What exactly does that mean?
So a non-executive director is a director that doesn't formally act as a director for a company. They are essentially advisors to a business to business owners, and they help to ensure that, first of all, the business is being run in the correct way. But a good non-executive director will do more than that, and they will help to sort of grow and to advance the business, either through bringing some of their own skills and experience to the table, and also quite often opening up their sort of book of contacts and their network and helping to bring new opportunities to a business.
And what would be the typical profile of someone who might, take that role?
So the majority of people that I certainly work with, they have typically spent sort of 25, 30 plus years working in corporate environments. They've been like sitting at the C-suite, so they are CEOs, chief operating officers, they could be directors, managing directors, sales directors. So they're typically senior leaders in businesses that normally are quite large. So they've come through, through their career, they've had a lot of professional training, they've had a lot of experience. They are professional business managers, business leaders. And so, they typically come from that background, and they're looking for ways to help to share that experience with typically like the sort of younger businesses and the next generation of leaders.
That was going to be my next question, actually. Why would they want to do this? Is it that they just still want to be involved, or obviously an income related aspect to it? So what are the typical reasons?
Yeah, it's a combination. So many of the people, again, that I work with, they are far too young to retire. And even if they are sort of thinking about retirement, they don't just want to go from like a big corporate job for a big corporate employer to nothing. It's a bit too much of a jump. So they are looking to sort of like take their skills and experience and all the value that they've built up over the course of a career, and to help share it with again, that next generation of leaders. So people who are sort of stepping into those roles, coming up, and just helping to make a difference. For some of those people, it is about the financial side. So they still want to generate a good financial income, and it can be a very nice way of generating an income, because if you have 3, 4, maybe 5 non-exec appointments, that can quite often build to a very lucrative sort of 6-figure income if they are the right type of appointments. But they have lots of diversity. They're not stuck in corporate politics, and most of all, they are maintaining like intellectual stimulation. So they're still being like engaged intellectually and part of a team, part of a group, but without all the responsibility.
Okay, so it sounds like a lot of flexibility there. They have a lot of choice and control over their time and who they work with, and that sounds great. In terms of wealth building, what are the benefits for someone who might, move into an NED role when it comes to their own sort of personal wealth building?
Yeah, I mean, it can be very lucrative if you go for the right type of roles. So I don't just work with senior executives who may be, sort of 4 or 5 years away from, as I say, retirement in inverted commas. I also work with like executives that may be in their late 40s or, sort of early 50s that are still have a long way to go before they even think about that. But they see a financial opportunity where they can build up, 2 or 3, maybe 4 clients, and generate an income that far exceeded what they were even getting in their corporate roles. So they've got the best of both worlds in those cases. They've got a higher degree of income. The income is less risky. So there's a lot of changes happening with big businesses, sort of downsizing, and particularly with AI. It's been happening for years, but with AI now coming into the frame as well, there's a lot of jobs that are being lost or not replaced. And so they just see it as a way to really regain control over their life, their financial livelihood, and their career as a whole.
And I imagine time as well is a really key aspect there, because we know that the number one reason pretty much that holds people back from building wealth and actually becoming financially independent, you could say an excuse or a reason, either way, is lack of time. We hear it all the time. We hear that. So, this gives them that time, I guess, to not just work on the business with the company, but then to work on their own wealth building activities, whether that's property or, other IP that they may have.
That's exactly it. And I see a lot of the clients that I work with do just that. And they are sort of driving this. It's not by any suggestions of myself, but they are sort of rebuilding how they where they get their primary income from. And because they have time, they have capacity, they have bandwidth, they can actually look at things like their home, like any investment portfolios, and they can start to think like, right, does that still work for me? Is this pension working for me in the way I want it to? And start to think more, I say more freely, but they just have more time to think about what do I want that to look like and what steps do I need to be taking now to put that into place, whether it's like property or whatever they choose.
So is this where this term portfolio career comes in?
Yeah. So portfolio is like you essentially have more than one employer. Like you have a portfolio of roles, and I say employer lightly because typically these executives, they're set up as like self-employed, or they run their portfolio through a limited company that they own, which again, it gives them more control over, sort of tax and how they are deriving their income, where they're building their wealth. So by portfolio, it's essentially more than one. You've got multiple lines of income, essentially.
So let's look at what led you to this point then, Adrian. So what's your experience with this area?
Yeah, so I've been in executive transitions for just over a decade now. So I started it was August 2015 actually. I at the time was working with a very large global technology company on their talent acquisition teams, and I was heading up their a part of their business across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And then I was just turning 30 at the time, and I decided if I was going to do this entrepreneurial thing, I've always been quite an entrepreneur at heart, that was the time to take it. So I left that role and I started a very niche business that helped senior executives step out of full-time employment into business ownership. And I built that over a period of 5 to 6 years. I had several people working for me. And then it was around 2019, I had an opportunity to acquire one of my corporate clients. And so that was my first sort of taste of acquisitions and just what was possible from like an M&A perspective. And as a result of that, I went on a slightly different journey where over the next 3.5 years, I acquired a dozen businesses in total. They weren't all successes. I had some real train wrecks in there, but I also had some successes as well. So over a period of, it was just under 3 years, I built up a multi-million revenue group purely through acquisition. Now, where it all sort of changed for me personally was as part of that process of building that group, I had spoken to just over 700 small business owners from a perspective of potentially acquiring their business. And that gave me real insight into the realities of like the SME marketplace. And these businesses range from anywhere from a few $100,000 in annual revenue all the way up to the multi millions. And what I started to realize was that there was a real distinct gap between these businesses that were looking to grow, but they didn't have the expertise and the capability. And then from my executive transitions business, seeing all of these senior leaders that were wanting to step into like portfolio careers, they wanted to step out of full-time employment, but what they really wanted more than anything was to be able to help shape smaller businesses, to mentor, to guide, to help them grow to the next level. And that ultimately is what led me to sort of refocusing back on the executive transitions and connecting the dots, really, being the bridge between the two worlds.
Obviously, that time was the whole COVID time. So did that help accelerate those decisions in people suddenly looking at what they've been doing for the last 20, 30 years and saying, oh, maybe now is time for a shift?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, COVID really, obviously, is very impactful for everyone, but it really changed everything because all of a sudden the hybrid working became into the mainstream for the first real time. So a lot of these executives were thinking, actually, I don't want to be doing the excessive amount of travel that many of them were doing, 70, 80, 90 hour plus weeks. They wanted more balance. I think with the lockdowns, it gave a lot of people a taste of there's more to life than just work. And that really sparked a whole, why am I doing this sort of curiosity. Equally from the SME side of things, like many of these businesses, as soon as particularly the first lockdown hit, many of these businesses just completely fell apart. It became apparent just how many were running on fumes, like financially. They didn't have proper resources in place. They weren't operating as proper businesses. And so the whole thing really sort of showed its face, essentially. during that time, I had started acquiring. So I've done a lot of work in the franchise sector. So I helped executives transition into franchise business ownership, and I had an opportunity to acquire some franchise networks. And it was just that whole experience together really sharpened a perspective for me personally. I'm like, there is a massive gap here on both sides, the executive side and the SME side.
Your entrepreneur spirit, you sniffed out a real opportunity there, and you took it. But I know for you personally, there was a real high, and then there was a low, right? So when we first started working together, I know your kind of wealth plan was build big business and sell that and kind of live happily ever after. And you had a shift, didn't you, along the way?
I had a massive shift, which in hindsight has been probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. But at the time, it was horrific. So I've always been very entrepreneurial. Typical, early teens, started your first business, and I've always had a track history of that. And my aspiration was to build up a very large business through acquisitions, essentially. And I'd gone a good way down that path, and it was in. When was it? It was late 2022, early 2023 when everything started to shift. So I had two very close family members, like immediate family members, pass away very unexpectedly, like just completely came out of the blue. A couple of weeks later, my younger sister called me up to say that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer, which was a real stops you in your tracks, because in my mind at the time was that, it doesn't happen. Younger sister doesn't happen, but obviously it does. A couple of weeks after that, I had two very close friends also let me know they had been diagnosed with cancer as well. And then on top of that, one of my, it is actually my last acquisition, that went incredibly wrong. It was quite a big business. It was a turnaround. I tried to save it, but I wasn't successful. And that business was kind of like a boulder, like at the top of the hill that started to go down, and it really dragged me through it. And I had, I remember very vividly standing in my office. So it's my dream office. I had a 2-story barn conversion, absolutely stunning building. Like it's a head office for different companies. Standing there thinking, all I've done here is create myself a golden cage. All I had done, I so desperately wanted to be with my family, with, sort of be there for my personal side of things, but I just physically couldn't because of everything that was happening. That kind of, unfortunately, didn't stop there. That kind of led on to the acquisition in a period of 6 months. The one that fails, I nearly lost everything. So I was on the brink of bankruptcy. I lost a very large amount of money personally. Shortly after that, my wife and I separated. And shortly after that, I had a cancer scare myself. And that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, I guess. And at that point, I really stepped back to reevaluate, like, what am I doing? Like, what is life about? What's important? And that was the sort of the shifting point for me.
Well, thanks for sharing, Adrian. That's quite a lot to have to navigate through, isn't it? And obviously, I do hope that your sister and everyone is okay now. It's interesting, isn't it? Because many people who are ambitious, have this dream, this vision, and often reach that moment. Even when it comes to financial independence, you work so hard to achieve the goal, and then when you get there, you actually realize, okay, perhaps this isn't quite what I expected, and what's next. And it's not making you happy, actually. And then almost you have to kind of strip back and get back to what the core things are, your core values, and actually, the things that just make you wake up happy every day. And obviously that was part of the process that you've gone through. But I must imagine you see that with a lot of the CEOs as well, in terms of their own identity, when they have been like the CEO of this major company for so many years, and then suddenly they wake up and they're not that anymore. How do you navigate that with them?
That identity piece for executives is massive. I think it's hugely underestimated by executives who are in their corporate role and thinking of transitioning. And it's one of the first things that I address when working with people, and we consistently maintain. And I think Daniel Priestley has a really great saying that summarizes it, which is, you can't see a mountain when you're standing on top of it. And it's the same for a lot of these executives. They have this whole mountain of value. They have all these years of experience, knowledge, network, all of these like hard-won, sort of like commercial and business experiences and life experiences, and yet they can't often see that. And so when they step away from the title, whether it's a CEO or a sales director, whatever that title is, they start to question, well, who am I? And equally, when they step away from a big corporate name like Sony or Disney, whatever that is, it causes a real crisis of identity. And so a lot of what we do first of all is just unpacking, like, this is who you are, like, this is what you have, this is the experience that you have, and helping people to recalibrate like that identity piece. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen overnight. It's an ongoing process, but you can really work through that in sort of like 3 to 6 months if you're conscious of it, I guess.
If there's anyone listening now, Adrian, and perhaps they're in this position, where they like the idea of this, and maybe they're sort of thinking about this in the next couple of years or so, what would be some things that you could give them, as advice now, almost to sort of sit down, and if they're to write a list of things that they should be thinking about, questions they should be asking themselves? Yeah,
I mean, the first thing I say is that I am yet to speak to an executive who has left their full-time corporate role and started like a second career, who has regretted it. Like over the 10 years of doing this, I'm yet to speak to someone who's looked back and regretted it. So that's the first thing to say, is that it's, once people do it, they always say, I wish I'd done it sooner. But really, I would take stock and I'll sit down and I'll first of all look at timing. So timing is a really important factor when it comes to transitions. Now, there's never a perfect timing. Like, there is never a perfect timing, but there are optimal times. So if you, for example, still have children that are in, say, private education, then financially, it may not be the best time, because those fees still need to be paid. If you have children that have left education, or a year or two away from leaving, and you can see a sort of light at the end of the tunnel there, then actually the timing might be good. Equally, when there are changes at work, so if there is a change of leadership, if there is restructuring, these can be changes outside of your immediate control that could serve as the perfect platform from which to start thinking about making a jump. Equally, there's like, these are all inflection points, and another common inflection point that I see is if there are health concerns. So if someone in the family or close friend has health, or there's something that's happening, it does make you take stock. So I would be sitting down seeing, have there been any of these inflection points like happening around me, and maybe now is the right time. And then alongside that, I would also take a strong look at the financials, which obviously ties in directly to why they probably listen to yourself, Christian, because you do want to give yourself some runway. Quite often you don't need the length of runway that people think. So, having a couple of years would be great, but you don't always need that length of runway. It's just really sitting down and being like, can I give myself some breathing room to get this off the ground? Because it doesn't happen overnight. Like, it does take time. If you can give yourself 6+ months, then you can really sort of think seriously about, okay, I could make this work.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I know when we've spoken before, you've said that there are some clients who've landed roles in as little as 6 weeks. Obviously not everyone is that quick. What are some of the actions that perhaps you and they are taking during those initial, couple of months to find the right roles?
Yeah. So over time, what's became clear to me, and what I say developed, I don't think that's right. I don't feel like it's ownership, but I've just sort of observed and shaped, is basically there's a roadmap of being able to step out of corporate and to build a portfolio career, and not having to wait years for that to start to sort of generate a return. And typically that roadmap has 3 phases. So the first one is your positioning, which in other words is how are you being perceived, which is a very high, important topic for a lot of senior executives, really care, and quite rightly, about how are they being perceived by, peers, people external, etc. So quite often we have to recalibrate the positioning. So helping them to see the mountain of value that they're standing on, that they don't quite see at that time. Once we've done that piece, we then look at existing networks. So one of my favorite books is Acres of Diamonds, and it's a really small, and it takes about an hour and a half to read. It's really short book, but basically it sort of highlights that a lot of us are so busy looking ahead and looking out and looking, away from ourselves to be able to go and build our wealth or to, do the next thing, get the promotion, that very rarely do we stop and look kind of where we're at and look back and be like, actually, there's already a lot of value here. So we look at existing networks and we look at what we can do with those to help generate the right type of opportunities at the right sort of compensation models and a fair value. Because a lot of people that I work with do not know how to price and value, price their value essentially. From that, we then look at, and the third stage is looking at developing new networks. So how can we start to develop new networks with people that are more aligned to your values, more aligned to what you're looking to achieve, like commercially from your portfolio, and then we just bring it all together. So yeah, it's sort of a very clear three stage roadmap.
Yeah, network, I can understand is so important, and LinkedIn is a professional network that I'm sure many of these people will be using and be present on. So, are there any things that you see executives doing wrong on LinkedIn that perhaps you could point them in the right direction?
Yeah, I think a lot of the executives that I've worked with, I would say 95% plus, again over a period of 10 plus years, a lot of them are incredibly modest, incredibly humble. A lot of them are introverted, and quite simply, they just don't put themselves out there enough. They don't, put themselves out there enough, and quite often they don't know how to do that. In a way that is being perceived in the right way, doesn't come across as like tacky or salesy. So I would just encourage, if you are to listen to this and sort of feel that, that could be me, just to really look at what are you doing, how are you presenting yourself outside of your corporate employer and your corporate job role, because that's normally the starting point.
Yeah, and I guess many people are using it more as a sales, to look at it more as sales versus hiring, or vice versa.
Well, yes. I mean, so again, a lot of these like executives have been brought up in a world where LinkedIn is being used as a hiring platform, whether that's for finding their own roles or for hiring people for their team. It's been a hiring platform. But LinkedIn, from a sales perspective, you've got your decision makers within seconds away. Like they're seconds away from you from a keyboard. So when viewed from that perspective, it can be the most phenomenal sales platform. And I say sales really lightly because a lot of people have a bad association with the word sales, but really it's about connecting. And so where I see a lot of people go wrong with LinkedIn is that they try to sell on LinkedIn, whereas we're more about like identifying who are the people, the companies that I can really add most value to and that resonate with my values and who I am and everything I sort of stand for, and then connecting with them. We're not trying to sell to them, we're just connecting with them. And then from that place, once we can get a conversation going, we can start to understand, well, is there a further conversation here, or is there not, or is there one down the line, etc.
So what I'm picking up really is that this is a wonderful opportunity for someone who perhaps is really short of time. They've done their piece in the corporate world. They've climbed the ladder. Perhaps there isn't anywhere further for them to go, or as you said, there may be a catalyst, that's a reason for them to now think of change. And this is a really positive change that can give them much more time, much more control, still to generate an income, still to keep their brains ticking over, and allow them to then focus on other wealth building interests, outside of that as well. Would you say there's anything to add to that?
No, I think he's absolutely right. It's exactly how it is. There's a lot of incredible opportunity out there, particularly with smaller businesses who don't have the budgets or that for a full-time executive role. So you can really shape and carve your own career, have that control aspect, but also give you the time and bandwidth to be focusing on building wealth outside of your primary income, which is something that I've personally learned the hard way, and I'm a massive advocate for.
And to have some purpose or regained purpose, right? Working for something that you really, perhaps you've lost your passion in your role, and that happens, right? When you've done something for a long time. And this is an opportunity now to maybe realign with a different sector, but bring those skill sets and those connections that you've built up over the years.
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head, Christian.
Wonderful. So, Adrian, if anyone's listening now and they'd like to connect with you, where's the best place for them to do that?
So I'm very active on LinkedIn. So it's Adrian Knight. I post content every day on LinkedIn, talking a lot about career transitions, executive transitions, small businesses and how they can grow. Alternatively, you can go to my website, which is SMEnonexec.com.
Fantastic. Make sure we link to those resources for you in today's show notes. Well, look, Adrian, thanks so much for sharing. Sounds really wonderful what you're doing, and long may it continue. So thanks again.
Oh, thank you so much, Christian. It's a real pleasure. Thank you again for having me.
Okay, good to hear from Adrian there. And we talk about what's your why, don't we, Kevin? That's an early part of the process, is to really identify what motivates you, what's driving you. And often that is stemmed from a catalyst of some sort. And for Adrian, it was a pretty big one, right? Multiple events that compounded and, resulted in near bankruptcy and obviously family members, unwell. And that was the turning point for Adrian when he realized he had to make a shift in his life.
Yeah, I mean, catalysts are a reason to interrupt your current pattern. I mean, in many arguments, a catalyst is something that stimulates a chemical reaction that leads to something positive, I hope. And this is what a catalyst is in our language, is what is the circumstances in which lead you to conclude the current paradigm, your current way of thinking, your current way of doing is just not right and needs to change. And the change leads to a very positive outcome for you, for your family, for your work-life balance, for your wealth, for your legacy. You can just see that the catalyst is the starting point, the very ignition of everything. And sadly, most people never get one. And it doesn't have to be a tragedy like it was for me, or an almost tragedy, which it was for Adrian. It doesn't have to be something negative. It could be something very positive. An inspiration, for example. Something that you heard from somebody else that inspires you, or somebody's done something, you go, well, if they can do it, I can do it. So the catalyst has got to come from somewhere. But in a busy life, the tyranny of the routine, the fabric we build around us can sometimes, it's almost like a mesh of stuff happening, and it takes all the influences away. It almost bounces them away so that you get stuck in the very web that you're trying to escape from. And whatever analogy works for you. An object at rest stays at rest. It doesn't do anything. So it's great for Adrian. Actually, we don't hear many people talking to employees so often. It's very often, isn't it? We're talking to business owners, entrepreneurs, property business owners, and so on. So it's great to hear that Adrian's got a very firm, strong message to influence for the positive those people who've spent their lives dedicated in the corporate world. So hats off to him.
And we know from our own experience with our members, Kevin, that time is a challenge. So who wouldn't want more control over their time and more choices? And that really is what the NED role gives to people. And that allows them then to start thinking about more diversification. And that's really key, isn't it, in wealth creation?
Well, it's key in wealth creation, but I think it's key at a certain point in life. If you think about the new chapter that's being opened in the lives of people who've served their employer well, and then determine themselves to have lots of experience that they can then bring to bear for others on a fractional basis, or not on a full-time basis. So I think that diversification of income streams, very good. Diversification of experiences, diversification of connections. And of course, the big one, that if you're no longer giving of yourself 40, 60, 80 hours a week, and you can do some non-executive director roles paid for, and I definitely appreciate the point, don't work for free, you're already adding enough value, you've created the right to that value, you're standing on that mountain of value, as he refers to it, I think is entirely right. But I think it does give you more time, because you can choose how much of your time to spend to dedicate towards that recurring income process as well. And we often see that with our members who they have a target financial independence, but they reach financial security, which allows them to work on their own terms, if you like, which allows them to negotiate their hours in a way that frees up more time for wealth building activities and more time for family, of course, which sometimes has been the price that's been paid along that corporate journey.
Could really be looked as almost a step, couldn't it, from going from that full-time position, not wanting to give up completely, but just having that sort of intermediate step that leads up to the later years, perhaps, when they do want to just cut back. I think it fits well for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think there's also an identity issue. We talked about, we often refer to them as C-suite, executives, those people who are influencers at the highest level in their companies and acknowledged as such. And so they would wear a badge of honor, sometimes literally wear a badge, but they're wearing something, both intellectually and emotionally. And that identity can easily be lost at the end of a corporate life. So having a role that you can play for somebody else, even if you're playing it for multiple companies and multiple organizations and multiple relationships, it gives you a greater identification and allows you to keep that feeling of being important to others as well as important to yourself. So I think it's a really great idea that he's got, and I know he's experienced the franchise world as well, which we know is often a bridge for individuals who've been used to the corporate structure, and then they like the structure of a franchise because they're so used to structures being around them, as opposed to the on-the-hoof entrepreneur we often meet who don't have any structures around them at all because they're just full of ideas and energy, and it's the lack of structure that causes them the problem, and they look to other types of NEDs, CFOs and CMOs, marketing people and financial people, to help create the structure. So, I think this whole idea has got lots of merit, particularly in a world where we're demanding much more control of that portfolio lifestyle. So good for Adrian for identifying that with the C-suites, and we're certainly keen to help people build multiple streams of recurring income to create that financial certainty when that day comes when you don't need to do any of that. And by the way, for some people, and we know that with some of our coaches that we work with, business coaches that we work with, Chris, that sometimes they will work time for money with their coaching clients, so they'll charge a fee for the time they spend. But when they get to a certain point, they can afford to coach for equity. They can say, well, instead of being paid a sum of money per month, I will work with you as a non-executive, if you like, and in exchange for a share of the equity. And if you've got enough skill, you can build a portfolio of equity positions with different companies. And I know certainly that's true of those who sell businesses for multi-millions. They will often do that. They'll create equity stakes in other companies because they want to influence. So I think the desire to influence and to give back, but with value, not for free, reinforcing the point that Adrian wants to make very powerfully, and he does so well.
Yeah, so thanks to Adrian for sharing today. And Kevin, next week will be our last podcast before Christmas. We'll be taking our usual couple of weeks break over Christmas and the New Year.
Are we going to be jingle jangling?
We might have to, yeah. We have to get the red wine out for next week.
I never say no to red wine, as you well know.
But obviously a time for all of our listeners to reflect and to start thinking now about what they want to achieve next year. And, please do reach out to us. And we would love to have a chat with you and love to put the plan in place and help you to make next year your best year yet.
Yeah, I think it's important, actually. And I think you make a good point, Chris, that rather than create a resolution, resolve instead to create a plan. Because a plan you can act on in small amounts every month. And because there's small steps and easy to act on, you won't lose that momentum. We're all too often, I suppose, more often than not, resolutions or aspirations without really an action plan that gets considered and resolved to stick to. And I think everybody knows that. So I don't think we're big on resolutions, but we are big on plans.
We are indeed, yeah. So, feel free to reach out either by heading to wealthbuilders.co.uk and you can click on the big red button that says book a discovery call or send us an email, hello@wealthbuilders.co.uk. I think that's a wrap for today, Kevin. So, thanks again for listening. And Kevin, you and I will be back same time, same place next week.
We will indeed, my friend. And until then, see ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget that we are constantly updating our resources inside the Wealth Builders membership site to help you create, build and protect your wealth. Head over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership right now for free access. That's wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership.